Welcome, everyone. We'll give it just another minute or so for people to settle in, and we'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. Thanks for joining us, and I'll be right back to get this started. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to another installment of our webinar series. I want to go over just some basics here, some of the housekeeping. We are recording this webinar. We'll be posting it to our resource center afterwards. So those folks that like to rewatch or share it with a colleague or a coworker, you can certainly go and go to our website justask.net and click on our resource center, and all of our webinars, all of the previous ones are posted, and this one will be up within the next 24 hours or so. This is a live demo, so bear with me. Don't plan on doing a lot of bouncing around today, mainly sticking to PowerPoint, but again, bear with me if I run into any technical glitches. And we will be doing a Q&A via the chat. Please post your questions in the chat. It is just me doing the presentation, so I'm not going to monitor that during the webinar, but I will review the chat at the end of the webinar and do my best to answer your questions. And I always reserve about an hour after these webinars for people to reach out to me either via phone or email. At the end of the webinar will be my contact information. Feel free to ask, reach out to me to ask a very, a specific question or a question that's, very specific to your organization, how you should handle something, some of the ways to think through things. I'd be happy to talk through that with you folks. Also need to mention that we had a little bit of a snafu here in the titling of this. We made a change to understanding the Microsoft 365 backup solutions, but never updated the title of the webinar about Microsoft 365 tools. So we'll go ahead and give you a two for today. We're going to go through Microsoft 365 backup, and then I'm going to highlight some of the apps and tools as some bonus content that are included in the Microsoft 365 stack, but people don't just generally don't utilize very often or aren't aware of the power of that. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started and dive into our agenda. Really when it comes down to your data retention and the Microsoft 365 stack and the backup of that data, really there's two areas of responsibility. Microsoft has a certain responsibility as part of their service level agreement, their data resiliency and data redundancy requirements that they have to make sure that your data is available to you. So there are certain things that Microsoft certainly does take care of for you. And then there are certain things that are your responsibility and your organization's responsibility. And so we'll kind of go through those differences. And then, as I mentioned, we'll dive into some bonus content to go over a couple of the applications that are included in the Microsoft 365 stack that people just may not be leveraging to their fullest capabilities. So let's start with, what does Microsoft take care of for you? So certainly, when you're storing data in the Microsoft 365 stack in their cloud, just so everybody is aware, that is stored in Microsoft Azure, which is their geo-redundant cloud data centers that are scattered all around the world. As you'll see here, you've got data centers scattered from Australia all the way up to British Columbia and everywhere in between. So Microsoft takes very seriously your data and your access to that data. Their job is to make sure that data is available to you and is stored to your specifications. So as an example, you may be under a regulatory compliance where you have to store your data within the borders of the United States because you have sensitive data that may be exploited by other countries. If that's a regulatory compliance that you have, you can make sure that when you set up your Microsoft 365 tenant with Microsoft, that all of your data is housed within the United States. You can set geo redundancy capabilities or policies where, for example, your primary data center that your data is stored in might be the central data center outside of Chicago, but you may have a redundant data center down in Texas or over in Atlanta or in Virginia that then has a second copy of your data in case something terrible was to happen to Chicago. So again, it all depends on what your needs and what your requirements are for your organization, and then how you have things set up within the Microsoft 365 portal. Certainly, Microsoft is going to keep multiple copies of your files, because if they lose some of your data, that is just unacceptable. That is a violation of the terms of their terms of service. A lot of negative connotations that go along with that. So in general, Microsoft is going to do a very good job of making sure that your data is safe and that it is accessible. With that, here are the things that Microsoft, there are 4 core principles regarding data. And, security, compliance, transparency. Big thing I want to point us to is this privacy and control here. They're committed to giving you control over the collection, use, and distribution of your data. So this is, they're going to give you access. They're going to provide the place for your data to live. But certainly, if you want to make sure that you have multiple versions of a file backed up so you can go back in time, if you need to make sure that you've got redundant copies of something in case of a database corruption or something like that, that is not Microsoft's responsibility. If you save a file to OneDrive, they're going to make sure that that file is stored and accessible to you. If you happen to save a file that contains a corrupt database over top of a file that has a non-corrupt database, well, you've replaced the usable file with the corrupt file, and Microsoft is going to make sure that that corrupt file is available to you, because it's not their job to look at the viability of that file. It's just you put it there, they want to make sure it's available to you. So another piece is often data is scattered everywhere. You've got it all over the place. And one of the big pieces with the Microsoft 365 stack is it gives you a place to centralize all of your data. You can bring everything together into one storage repository, or storage repositories that at least work together, such as SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams. You can even have storage, what they call a storage blob in Azure, which is just extra storage space where you can store legacy data to make sure that it's available to you when you need it. It's that stuff that you don't access very often, but for a compliance reason or something of that nature, you may need to keep it for a certain amount of time. So again, your data can be scattered all over the place. And one of the big keys with Microsoft is they've really gone to that single sign-on, single identity. That's what allows us to leverage all of these various places that your data is stored, your OneDrive, your SharePoint, your Teams. Since you identify as yourself with Azure Active Directory, you can then have all of these various places that your data could be stored, both within and outside of the Microsoft 365 stack, tied back to Azure Active Directory. So once you've authenticated there, you have full and complete access to your files and to your data. So again, this is some of the ways they allow you to have access to and control of your data. And this shows a kind of nice bundled up right into Microsoft's cloud. Now, I know certainly Microsoft has some default retention settings. For example, if you delete an email out of your Outlook, it's going to go to the deleted folder for 30 days. And then after that, it's going to go to the quote deleted folder for another 91 days, I believe is the default setting. And after that, it becomes purged. It can be restored out of your deleted folder, or you can contact your administrator that administers your Microsoft 365 account, and they can dig through the deleted folder to find it. That deleted folder is certainly one that is not very well organized. It's not organized by deletion date or file name or file type. So it requires some substantial amount of digging to locate a file out of that repository. So again, those are some of the default settings. A lot of these are controlled by policy, and these policies are set up when you established your Microsoft 365 tenant. So you may want to have a review of those policies to ensure that the retention policies that are set are what you A, expect, and B, what you are required to have due to any regulatory compliance your company happens to be under. So that leads us nicely into, so Microsoft's doing a great job of making sure that your data is stored, it's stored securely, and it's available to you. What is your responsibility is a lot more granularity. You as a staff member, as an employee, you need to understand where your data is being stored. Every company is different. You may be a Microsoft 365 subscriber, but you may still maintain a file server. You may have a cloud-based CRM or line of business application that stores a lot of your data that isn't necessarily tied into the Microsoft 365 stack. So really understanding where your data is stored and getting it stored in a manner where it can be backed up. Sitting on your desktop is not the place to store important files or important data. It's fairly difficult to back up the desktop of a standard PC. Shouldn't say difficult, it's just not something that's done all that often. So again, mapping your documents folder to your OneDrive, and then looking at some kind of third-party backup to back up your OneDrive, that's something that you certainly should look at. Also, you need to understand your company's retention policies. How long do you need to keep data around? Are you under any regulatory compliances? I know that, for example, financial and medical could be 7 to 10 years of keeping data around. And it's not every piece of data, it's specific types of data. So really understanding the requirements you're under and your company's policy will take you a long way in understanding where your data is, and then working with IT and your IT department to understand where do I need to make sure my data is stored to ensure that it is backed up. So, and you also want to make sure you understand the process for requesting an exception to your company's data retention policy. You may, for whatever reason, need to store something elsewhere that's not part of the best practices. And then what is that exception process? And for those of you decision makers and business owners and IT guys out there, if you don't have a policy, you may want to create one, or at least make a statement that there is no exceptions, something along those lines. Otherwise, that nebulous "I don't know" will lead people to putting data places they shouldn't. So, so again, understanding what things are backed up. Are there specific folders that are backed up? Do you still have a file server? And do you still use that for a file repository for whatever reason? Is that the best place to store it to back up? And then certainly implementing some third-party tool to pull the data out of your Office 365 tenant and store it in a storage repository that's under your control. That is the biggest recommendation I can make on Office 365 backup, is that Microsoft's not going to lose a piece of data, but if you inadvertently store a corrupt file, somehow you execute a ransomware into your OneDrive or into your computer, and it gets into your OneDrive and starts encrypting files, Microsoft's not responsible for the integrity of that file. They're just taking the file that you gave it and storing it there. So as an example, as I mentioned just earlier, if somehow a file becomes corrupt or there's a ransomware infection, that corrupt file is going to be stored within the Microsoft 365 cloud. And it's going to be very useless to you because it's a corrupt file that you cannot utilize. So if you have some kind of backup situation, third-party backup setup, you could go to that repository and restore that file from prior to the corruption. Same thing with ransomware and malware. If you, somehow get your system infected, first of all, there are plenty of ways to prevent that, but at the same time, if there's an infection on your system and it corrupts some files, being able to go to that repository and pull a copy of that file from pre-infection, so for sure that it doesn't have any lingering effects of the infection because it was saved prior to that event happening. And it also protects you from inadvertent or intentional deletion. I mean, certainly there are some protections there, your deleted folder, your recycle bin, your deleted folder. But if somebody has admin credentials, they can clear those out pretty quickly. And, without multi-factor authentication turned on, there are ways for your passwords and usernames to be compromised. So it's something to consider. And, the thing that I really want to kind of wrap up the Microsoft 365 backup with is, they're storing copies of your data for resiliency to ensure they meet their SLA. They're not there to ensure you have backup copies of your data. If you want to ensure you've got the reliable backups, you need some kind of third-party tool. And it could very well just be something that pulls out of the Microsoft 365 stack and then stores all that data in an Azure storage blob. So you have access to it, and you can go and restore that. And again, this would be your IT, your administrator doing that restoration. I wouldn't expect a frontline worker to be doing that. It would be a request you'd put into IT. But at the same time, that request may not be able to be honored without some kind of third-party backup tool that's going in and pulling all that data out and giving that full control of that data to you. And one of the nice things about Office 360 or Microsoft 365 backup is it's not expensive. It's just a few dollars per user per month. It all depends on the backup and the service level you're looking for and the requirements that you have, how long you need retention, things of that nature. but it's not this huge burden from a finance perspective. It's as I said, just a few dollars per user per month to ensure that those users' data is truly backed up. You have full and complete control of all of the previous versions, and you can do restores of that data pretty much at your leisure to any point in time, within reason, based on the backup policies of your third-party backup software. So again, more than anything, this is a shared responsibility. Microsoft, for their resiliency and their service level agreements, they have to have backup copies and protect your data. Or otherwise, people wouldn't trust them. They wouldn't be running their business in the Microsoft 365 stack. And they do a great job of that. They really, truly do. But if you want that granular control, want to be able to go back and grab previous versions that even like the versioning in Word and Excel isn't able to allow you to do, you really need to run your own third-party backup tool that pulls the data out of the Microsoft 365 stack and puts it somewhere. It could be a private data center, it could be Microsoft Azure, it could come back to a storage array that you happen to have still on site or attached to your servers. There's plenty of different ways to do it. More than anything, you need to do kind of an analysis of what data is so critical you can't lose, what regulatory compliances require you to keep, and then look at your available options and select the best option for where it needs to be stored for your organization. And again, from a user perspective, really understanding where you have to put things to ensure they're backed up. I can't stress that strongly enough, because IT does not want to tell you, no, that file's gone. They want you to put it in places that are being backed up. So make sure that you understand that, and each organization is different. So with that, I'm hoping I've at least peeled back the layers of the onion a little bit here on Microsoft 365 Backup. Due to the shared responsibility, there are some gray areas there, and I'm hoping I kind of cleared those up a little bit. Certainly, reach out to us. So give me a call after the webinar if you have any, you want any more granular detail on Microsoft 365 Backup, when and why and where you should be using it, things of that nature. Be happy to talk more granularly with you about your particular set of circumstances. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and pop into some of our bonus content here and highlight a few apps that are included in the Microsoft 365 stack that most people aren't utilizing very often or very well, and I just want to highlight them as tools to look into. For most of you, they're included in your subscriptions, and so it's one of those where you might as well take advantage of the tools that are provided to you as part of your Microsoft 365 subscription. First one I want to highlight is Planner. Planner is an excellent tool for, especially in the remote workplace we're working in right now, to be able to collaborate on projects, set up task lists, assign tasks to people with due dates, and really allow you to manage a project remotely, because you can set up the project, assign all of your various tasks, put your dates in. This leaves you places for the people you've assigned them to put in notes, complete those tasks. It's a great way of tracking a project from beginning to end. It could be used for a number of different things, whether it's an engineering project or a marketing campaign, or just even a overhaul of finance and accounting and how they're doing some reporting. You can put this all into Planner, build your tasks out, put them in order, assign them to folks, and ensure that they're completed. And it gives you a nice little dashboard, so it lets you know where your statuses are. So this is a great collaboration tool, especially, as I said, with a lot of us working remotely. This is a way to really cohesively bring your teams together, even though they may be scattered across multiple counties or even multiple states for that matter. The next one I want to highlight is Microsoft Lists. Microsoft Lists it's a very handy tool. I mean, I use it personally just to create lists for myself. It gives me this nice little checklist. That I've seen this used, that we use it for a lot of our reoccurring tasks where there's 30 things that need to be done, and every once in a while it just has to be completed. For example, here's an example down here, an onboarding checklist. If we bring on a new customer, we have a lengthy checklist that we go down of all of the information that we need to gather and everything that we need to make sure we've conveyed to that new customer, all of the various things that we need understanding on that new customer to ensure that we can support them properly. And Microsoft List is an excellent place to store all of that, and it gives you a nice, very easy to utilize list so that you can just go down and check off items as they get completed. You can even raise issues, things of that nature. So again, it's a nice to-do list type of format. It's a little bit more than Microsoft To Do, as you can share this across multiple people, whereas Microsoft To Do is kind of personal. I'll be honest, I've used Microsoft List for my own personal lists as well. So it's something to at least bring up. That normally it should be available in the apps through Teams or at portal.office.com. All of these will be available at portal.office.com once you log in. You have to look for them. They might not be an icon. You may have to search because they might be too far down the list, but they should be available to you with the vast majority of the Office/Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Another piece that I wanted to highlight, and I want to kind of go into this is leading in a little more into the automation that Microsoft is building in. Microsoft has Power Apps, which are what they've defined as low-code apps that can be created to run, various tasks, various repetitive tasks, to automate some workflows and things like that. Power Apps do not require you to be a programmer and understand all of the ins and outs of various programming language, but you can write little apps that do little things for you, such as pulling in data from various sources and displaying it on a pie chart or on a bar graph. A very, very powerful tool. It's a way to automate some of those really mundane tasks that eat up a lot of time. Certainly helps with efficiencies. So certainly explore Power Apps. The sky's the limit with Power Apps in what it can do. Really, it comes down to how creative can you be with what you need it to do. So again, and the time you're willing to invest to make it do that. But certainly Power Apps is one as far as automation. And then the last one I wanted to highlight was also Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow is a lot of triggers. Where if something happens, then it goes out and gathers some information and then places that information somewhere for you. So I've seen Flow used in a lot of ways where somebody enters something, for example, from the sales and marketing perspective, somebody enters something into the website, that triggers a flow. Hey, this field was submitted. Go get this information about the person who submitted that field and then add that field and that information that they submitted in the field to a SharePoint list. So it's a way to automate some of those touches, some of those ways, automate some of the flow through your organization, i.e. Microsoft Flow. So again, this is something that, it's a lot of if-then type statements, looking at how you can automate the importing and bringing in of information and then logging it somewhere for a human being to look at and then respond to. Again, lots of uses for Flow. Microsoft is really pushing hard on the automation. There's Microsoft AI is rolling out where you can actually apply some AI algorithms to things in the back end. That's another topic for another time. But with the work remote, a lot of efficiency, a lot of request for efficiency has come to Microsoft, and they're really pushing on some of the automation and making it simple enough for those of us that do not have programming degrees to be able to go in and build a quick Power App or set up a flow. And automate some mundane tasks that we have to perform on a daily or weekly basis. That's really just kind of annoying, and there are better uses for our time. So again, I wanted to just highlight some of those because those are apps that I do not see too many requests for, nor do I see too many customers utilizing very often. And I wanted to highlight that they are available to you. Don't be afraid to explore portal.office.com. Log in there someday when you've got a few minutes and just kind of poke around at all the various applications that are available to you. Do a quick Google search on them and see what they do. You'd be amazed at all of the add-ons beyond your Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint that are included in the Microsoft 365 stack that very few people truly leverage. So I wanted to point those out to everyone. So with that, I'll just kind of wrap things up here. I want to first of all thank everybody for coming. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks. We're going to be on a cybersecurity kick for the next couple of months here. We've left that off for a little while, but it's really time to get back and start revisiting this. The grand work from home experiment we're under has really widened the threat landscape, and unfortunately, still in the high 90% of cyber attacks are are launched or executed through human error. So one of the things we want to certainly highlight is phishing emails. They're at an all-time high with the work from home experiment. People are getting emails from folks that they never had to get emails from. They're working from home. They may not be quite as diligent in looking for the clues. So we want to make sure we go through phishing, how employees can be aware, things to look for. We're going to get real granular. We'll bring up a couple of phishing emails, show some of the tells within the email, that here are the things that you should look at to be skeptical. So that will be on the 7th of September. And certainly our Technology Resource Center, we've actually rebranded it here. I actually need to change out my my hyperlink here, but it is just our Resource Center now. We have COVID-19, business fundamentals, and our cybersecurity awareness campaign. So there's free resources there, a lot of really good information. Please leverage our website. Take a look at that, see what's out there for you. And again, all the previous webinars that I've done are there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A, look for questions. I'll leave this up. Here's my direct dial with my extension. My email address, as I said, I do reserve the last hour after these webinars for any direct questions here. Well, once again, I don't see a single question in the chat. I've either bored everyone to death, or I have done a great job of explaining the topic at hand here. Certainly, I'll give it a minute or here just in case somebody has anything, but certainly please feel free to leverage me via email or phone. I'd be happy to take your calls and talk through specific circumstances or instances that you'd like to discuss. Try to provide the best advice that I can on your circumstance. Well, with that, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll go ahead and wind this down. I want to thank everybody for attending. I hope this has been at least somewhat informative and informational for you guys. And once again, I'm certainly available if you'd like to pick my brain afterwards. Feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. Thanks again, and hope to see you again here in a couple weeks.